Thanks. Now we're back in open session. We'll continue on the agenda with item number 7, our Indigenous Engagement Plan update. The report's in your agenda package, and I'll turn the floor over to Sally.
Okay, unfortunately, Allison is unwell today, so I'm going to present on her behalf. So as you may recall, at the very beginning of us developing the, starting work on development of the Mississippi Watershed Plan, we did retain consultants to first develop and help us undertake an Indigenous engagement plan. And so CanBM Indigenous Professional Services, who I'm now going to call CIPS, they joined working with us in 2019, and they prepared materials. They sent them out to numerous Indigenous communities who have an interest in our watershed. And we were just getting to the point where we were trying to book meetings with them when COVID hit. And we tried off and on during 2020-22 to get it moving, but really there was no capacity within the Indigenous communities to work with us on it. So we more or less ended up parking it. But earlier this year in March, we re-engaged with CIPS to update the plan and to reinitiate that activity. So currently, we have 4 groups that have expressed interest, and we've met with 3 of the 4. We had a meeting tentatively scheduled with Curve Lake for next week, but it might need to be rescheduled, and that's yet to be confirmed. But the initial meetings have gone really well. The communities are very appreciative and understanding that we are going back to basically square one with them, saying, listen, you weren't able to participate throughout this project. Here are the documents that we produced at the various stages. We would like your input on them. And so we've started with the backgrounders that you might remember. There were 4 of them that we released 2019, 2020. And what CIPS has done has gone through those documents and prepared annotated versions of them, so that, because you can imagine when we released those to the public, we did one at a time over 6 to 8 weeks. You know, people had lots of time. And so what CIPS has done is they've gone in and annotated those versions so that they can skim through them and sort of skip to the good parts, as it were. They've also teased out those matters that they think most of the Indigenous communities will be most interested in, and prepared a set of questions that can sort of cut to the chase and help them sift through and get to the issues that are most likely of interest to them. Of course, we've said you can comment on anything you want, but we're trying to simplify it and ease it for them. So all of them have been very appreciative of that work that CIPS did. And so we're currently waiting for feedback from them on the backgrounders. We're going to go through that same process on the discussion papers. Whereas the meetings we've had to date with the 3 First Nation groups have largely been with 1 or 2 representatives, just sort of apprising them of the project and getting them aware of what we're asking of them. Now that they have had those initial meetings and they've had the opportunity to review the backgrounders, our goal is to hopefully meet on site for the round 2 and with a larger cross-section of the folks from those communities. So our timelines are that we hope to have all those in-person meetings this fall, such that we're able to come back to the board probably early 2023 with the report on our findings and any recommended changes to the watershed plan to reflect the input of the Indigenous communities.
Thanks for that, Sally. Any questions? I don't see any in the room. I can't see everybody online at the moment. Does anyone out there in Zoom land have a question? John Carreau, I see your yellow hand.
I wish it was gold, but it's not. just in terms of the communication and the restart, I'm very appreciative of that. I do think it might assist the board to have some sense of the flavor of those particular questions that you're highlighting or that the consultant is highlighting. Because quite honestly, there's going to have to be a conversation at some point in time between the board and First Nation representatives, certainly with any proposed changes to the watershed plan. So anything that can help, quite honestly, sensitize or familiarize the board in advance, I think would be advisable. I know that may be a little extra work, but I mean, if you've been able to share it with them, why not share it with the board? Thank you.
Good points, John. Any comments on that, Sally?
Yeah, I'll share the hyperlink to our Indigenous Engagement Plan page on our website because all the documentation's there.
Any other questions, comments? John Inglis.
Just a quick comment that when I read about the summary process, it occurred to me that there's a tremendous opportunity on the part of Cambium for editorializing.
So so Allison and I reviewed, largely Allison, but I also had a role in reviewing most of what SIPs produced. And I think the questions that they've posed and the comments they've made are through an Indigenous lens. And that's in fact why we hired them. So I wouldn't say I was concerned about anything, but I certainly, they made me reflect. Right? So I was comfortable with what they produced, but it made me sit back and think. And I think that'll be the case for everybody.
Thanks, Sally. Phil.
You mentioned the difficulty of getting Indigenous people to participate because perhaps overloaded. You'll note a good deal of our board here isn't here today because they attend by, it would help or is the lack of electronic stuff part of why we may be having difficulty. In other words, at school boards, they give children who don't attend computers or loan them, might I say, give them, they loan them that. That's not an expensive outlay if you can get people to participate, get going. So I guess I would put to John, if that's, he senses that's a problem somewhere, let's solve the problem. We don't want people who aren't up to date on technology or don't have technology to be held back from giving solid advice. Thank you.
Truthfully, that wasn't my impression. My impression is it's personnel. Not enough people or not the right people with the right expertise. They're suffering the same as I think most of us are, is, recruitment and retention.
Thanks, Phil. Thanks, Sally. Any other questions or comments? Seeing none, we'll move on to item number 8. We have a report from Matt Craig, a permit timeline report. I don't know, did you want to deal with item 8 and 9 separately, or did you want to lump them both together, Matt?
I can just flow into the next one.
Go right ahead.
Thank you. This is the second time we've reported to the board on timelines. Again, this is a request from Conservation Ontario to provide data for them, and they assimilate it throughout the province. And now we have our permit timelines and our permit activity reports in sync because they were different requests and serve different purposes. So we still, I think, have some reasonable results here. We're not meeting the goal in a few of the categories, minor and routine. We have 18 permits that we didn't report in time as required by Conservation Ontario. But if you look at our average turnaround time, it's pretty positive. Some of these, when we don't meet the timeline, is due to geography, holidays, sometimes coordinating with the landowner. So these issues do come about, and whenever there is a planning application associated with the permit, we ensure that we meet the planning deadline, because we know that there are other factors in play and other decisions that are involved. So overall, I think it's positive. I remember last time there's discussion where we had 3 out of the 4 major projects didn't meet the timeline. So we've made some improvements to basically in communication with some of those applicants about how it works, because again, this is new to them, about what our timelines are. And the major projects that we're dealing with now are major realignments in around Shirley's Brook and some other developments on feed mill and basically large subdivisions. So that's a summary of the report to date.
Thank you, Matt. Any questions for Matt on the report? John Inglis?
Matt, has this reporting requirement added significantly to your workload?
Somewhat, but what we do is as a department, it also creates a team atmosphere, because we look at how our projects are doing every 2 weeks when we meet as a department. There is some administrative work associated with tracking and reporting, but it's the standard that the development community is looking for, the province and Conservation Ontario. So I think we just forge ahead.
Thanks. Anyone else? Then we'll move on to the next report, Matt.
Okay, thank you. So this is the activity report, which we have been producing for 10 years. Unlike the timeline report, I'll just clarify, this isn't required, but it's something that that the board has decided over the years for a level of transparency to provide the information to our residents. We are at approximately have issued 150 permits this year, and last year we issued 300. So we're at the halfway point. I predict we'll probably issue around 200. If you look at the numbers, wetland permits have increased. I think that's attributed to a lot of some of the quality land is being used up, and people are looking at other alternatives. This doesn't mean necessarily that there's development in wetlands. It's adjacent lands or crossing of wetlands. And I would say that the residue of the floods, some of the application is coming to an end. Some people are still struggling with contractors and material, and that's still a very real issue. Our general inquiries, which is an indication of also how our activity levels are. Last year we had 760 and we're up to 430 this year. So it's pretty consistent on the inquiries and staff responding to residents in queries about transactions or our regulations. So overall, we'll probably won't hit the mark that we did last year. But again, as Sally mentioned at the beginning, some of these projects that we're working on are more complex, especially around in the city and some of the other urban areas in Mississippi Mills and Carlton Place.
Thanks, Matt. Any questions or comments on the report? And thanks. This report is always appreciated. It's nice to see the permits that are happening in our local municipalities, because sometimes we don't see these until we get here. I'll go with Steve and then I'll go with Phil.
Our permits are down.
Need you to speak into the mic so the folks online can hear.
Sorry, our permits and applications are down, understood, from last year, but are they comparable to 3 years ago, or was last year astronomically high? Are we kind of normal?
You're right. Last year was the highest number of permits we've ever received. So it's been a bit of a roller coaster with the flooding from 2017 to 19, and it spikes for shoreline repairs. So overall, if we hit 200, we'll be pretty consistent with the average over the last 6 years, I would say.
Thanks.
Thanks. Go ahead, Steve. Go ahead, Phil.
Yes, thanks. I noticed there are a lot of applications where people are applying to do something within 150 feet of a wetland. There was concern, I was concerned when we adopted this, that people would really be upset, but for those who have to go out and politically campaign, I noticed that you are able to allow reasonable development within in the regulated area close to wetlands. And I just wanted to comment on that. What sort of advice do you offer to people, or are you suggesting that they need to do so that they don't adversely affect the wetland adjacent, that they're adjacent to? Thank you.
So the wetlands, just to clarify, provincially significant wetlands, we regulate within 120 meters, and then other wetlands that meet the criteria that the board established is a 30-meter regulatory limit. So when generally if people are within 30 to 120, it's best management practices about construction, refueling, sediment and erosion control. If they're closer than 30 meters, then there's more, we look at grading plans and runoff and the drainage, and we may require more in depth, like an EIS, so environmental impact statement, which is usually goes in tandem with the municipal requirements.
Thanks. Any other questions for Matt? Seeing none in the room, I see none online. Thank you very much, Matt. Next, we have our final item on the agenda. We have the general manager's update, and I'm just asking Sally to go through any highlights in the report.
Thank you, Jeff. Okay, so a couple that I wanted to highlight to you. The first one is the La Tournelle Conference. This is something that historically this organization has always sent people to. Interestingly, just an update on this, is that the early enrollment for the participation is September 30th, and as of Monday, they were already oversubscribed. So there's a lot of interest in this conference this year. I think there's a lot of pent-up demand. So even though I had hoped to send 8 staff, they're now all on a waiting list, and we'll see whether they're able to attend. If there are members of the board who would like to attend, who know that they're returning in particular, please don't let this discourage you. Let me know if you would want to attend. I'm just concerned that want to make sure that our staff are able to, because they haven't been able to participate in any sort of training or conferences of this nature for several years. Next thing I wanted to highlight was on the second page, item number 6, the resource for land use planners. I just wanted to flag this for you. If you wanted to share that with your planning departments, I think it's a really good resource, particularly for the smaller municipalities that perhaps don't have access to the same resources. I think it is a good, I've scrolled through it. It looks like there's a lot of good, useful links to resources for, municipal land use planners. So I encourage you to share that. Item 8, the Ontario Building Code Section 8 septic program. So we've been able to secure contracts with 4 local municipalities. And so that program begins in the next month. So we are staffing up for that. We have people joining imminently. I have, however, just heard that somebody's accepted a position at Mississippi Mills. I don't know, Krista, if you're aware of that. So Aaron Levi is going to be joining Mississippi Mills and won't be available to support that program. But congratulations, Krista, on an excellent hire. Number 10, I just wanted to let you know that we've been, several months now in using, the work from home compressed work week. And there's also a cellular program that are all being reviewed, and we've structured some working groups, or the compressed work week is more just the operations group. But our intent is to come back to the Finance and Admin Committee next month with draft policies on that. Because all three of these have implications for the operations of the organization and potentially on budgetary matters. We wanted to get these policy matters in front of you before we contemplated the 2023 budget. And then lastly, another good news grant item is number 11, which is the LiDAR project. The Eastern Ontario Partnership applied for and got funding for the risk analysis. But when we applied for the LiDAR project, you might remember that it wasn't approved. So we ended up having to go back to North Frontenac and Central Frontenac for additional funding, and we all had to cough up a bit more money. Well, subsequently, the feds put out another round of proposal call, and this time they were approving LiDAR projects. And so South Nation applied retroactively, and we've got the funding, so we've been able to get refunds on that. So this is a good news item. So I've already issued the checks to Central and North Frontenac for their portions of the savings.
Exactly. John's got good news to report.
I can let you know after the meeting. I can't remember the number.
You should give him the check to take to his council meeting and
I
present it.
think, yeah, I think it's already gotten the
Let's do
mail.
that.
Yeah.
Any questions for Sally on her report? Bill?
First, I'm glad to see that the feds downgraded their expectation of how much you had to spend, as I understand. They allow smaller project. Is that correct? Is that how this one got through?
Euro, do you know the answer to that question?
I know there at the end of the program, right, the fiscal year, there was an extra budget that the feds that was available under the funding, right? So I think that probably explains why the project was retro eligible for the funding.
Well, anyway, I'm glad that the feds have demonstrated that they're interested in things like the floodplain mapping. And I want to assure any of you who are working with those, the quality of photographic stuff and so on that we're able to do is really remarkable. I was doing something with a church roof, and in the 2019 photo, you could get the outline of the roof. In the 2021 photo, you could actually see where the vents were, which was something I was interested in. So just, it's remarkable what you can get in the photo stuff, and it'll just really improve the planning process and so on. So any of your constituents ask, is it really worth all that money? I'm sure you'll be able to answer yes. It'll save you a bundle in planning, and you don't have to go out to the sites as many times. You can actually see on the photos. Second thing I wanted to comment on was the Laterno conference. If we're not able to get everybody to attend, they do offer. I attended one yesterday, and there are a couple of others that are online. I think we should be mentioning that just in case it might help people to get the flavor of what's coming. So even if you don't get to go this year, the Laterno people generally have put on dang good conferences, and they bring out relative information. The one yesterday was about, you would think Black people wouldn't have any much different idea about the environment, but they put forward some ideas that they maybe weren't always included and that kind of stuff. So it's worth at least looking at those, even if you can't get to come. And perhaps just this may encourage Laterno to go back to a larger conference. That for years it was downgrading in attendance, and now they may have the nerve or the courage to go back to host a larger thing. But it's an excellent site. Hamilton, what do you call it? It's the gardens there in Hamilton, so it's an excellent site. Anyway, those would be my comments. And also, I would say to members, we don't get a lot of frill benefits, but in future years, look at Laterno Conference. They've always been educative. I wouldn't want to steal a place from staff members, but it's also good to have an educated board who understands the upcoming issues. Long before CO2 was an issue, Laterno was addressing that. So if you can work it in, it's a hell of a time for people who are running for office to hold this meeting. It's just 5 or 6 weeks before election. But anyway, those are a summary of some of my comments about the great things about Laterno. And if you, and maybe you could get them to change a little bit, either make it a little earlier or after the election or something like that. Thank you.
Thanks, Phil. John Carreau, I see your golden hand.
There it is. 2 golden hands so far. I would certainly add to Phil's recommended support for the Laternel Conference and Symposium. I've had the opportunity and benefit to attend many of them, and I certainly encourage people to look at it, not only this year, but in future. And certainly their online presence is also quite beneficial. But I have a recommended update to the GM's update. And that is that Angela Coleman is now the new Executive Director for Conservation Ontario. And as I commented some time ago, the profile of Eastern Ontario, and in particular the Ottawa River Basin, gets, I think, second-class treatment by Conservation Ontario, with an executive director recently from the South Nation Conservation Area, and a chairman of Conservation Ontario who's also from Eastern Ontario. Now's the time to raise the profile. Good on Angela. Congratulations to her.
Thanks very much for that, John. Anyone else? Krista?
Thanks, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to acknowledge number 7, at the AMO conference, there was a delegation with Associate Minister, Parliamentary Assistant Yakabuski. Sally led that for us very well. She hasn't said it here, but it was a little bit disappointing in the level of dialogue back that we got from the PA. But I think maybe in response to his interest in continuing conversation, we could give that another try at Roma in January, because I think it was a very good presentation. I think it was well supported by the county. We just didn't seem to get leverage at that delegation, unfortunately, but I did want to acknowledge that it was an excellent presentation, and thanks Sally for her leadership on that.
Thanks, Krista. And at Romo, you can always shoot for a meeting with the minister himself rather than the parliamentary secretary,
Yeah.
second-class treatment.
Well, we did try for the minister, and this is what we were offered, and that's okay. No, that's okay. Just didn't quite have the pickup we were hoping it might.
Yeah, good suggestion.
Thank
Thanks.
you.
Anyone else? No, is there any other business that people wanted to raise at the meeting? Any other business, any announcements? Sally?
I just have a question. People don't have to answer me today, but if perhaps you could get back to me at a future date. I am curious when you anticipate your new councils appointing new members to this board. It's a question that all the CAs are kind of grappling with, because most of us have our AGMs in February, March. And with the people taking their seats earlier now, there's the potential for new board appointees earlier than when they typically have taken their seats at the AGM. So we're just wanting to sort of understand what's likely to happen in the municipality so we can plan around that, because the team is starting to do plans for new board member orientations and how logistically we're going to manage that. So if you could give me some feedback on that, that would be most appreciated. Really that early? Wow, okay.
You need to speak into your mic, Paul. Okay. You people in Zoom land don't need to hear this.
I can work the question into my answer
Thanks.
if you'd like. So for Leonard County, it is moved up. It's moved up for everyone really. And I believe it's the 15th that most of the lower tiers in Leonard County are having their new council sworn in. At the county, it would be the week after, just so everybody can have their head of council and deputy in place. But beyond that, I don't really know what individual municipalities might be doing in terms of having their appointments made. I expect for us, it'll probably be December before we get to it, but we're not quite as keen, I guess, as North Frontenac, but happy to get back to you though on that, Zoe.
Thanks, Krista. Yeah, I think if folks could just do some poking around locally and give Sally a flavor of when the new board, if new board members will be appointed before the AGM or be appointed to, because I remember last time, I know I was appointed in December, but I knew that my term wasn't going to start until the annual meeting in February. And that was the first meeting I attended. Our previous representatives just continued to represent. Anyone else? Going once? Going twice? Could I have a motion to adjourn, please? Let's get in line. Moved by Paul Kehoe, seconded by Kirby Thompson, that the meeting be adjourned at 2:17 PM. All in favor? Thanks a lot, folks.
Thank you, everyone.
Yeah, today's agenda was pretty light. I expect the next meeting will be a little heavier and a little longer.